Before we started doing the show, he said, "Don't you want to come and do the show?" I said, "Sure." I learned more about Jack than I ever did when he was living at home.
Ozzy Osbourne has never been one to apologize for who he is. He doesn't try to explain away the chaos that has followed him throughout his career. Instead, he simply lets his voice do the talking, and for more than 50 years, the world has been listening. His vocal style isn't the cleanest or the prettiest, but that's not what makes it special. What makes Ozzy's voice unforgettable is the raw emotion behind it. When he sings, you hear pure feeling unleashed without any filters or pretense. He has a unique ability to make pain sound powerful and meaningful. Ozzy came from humble beginnings as a factory worker in Birmingham, England. He was one of the forgotten kids, the ones society expected to stay quiet and accept their place in life. But Ozzy refused to follow that script. When the world told him to behave and conform, he only got louder. When people called him crazy, he embraced that label and made it part of his identity. When critics said heavy metal would never last as a music genre, he proved them wrong with every album and every song. His entire career has been built on defying expectations and breaking rules. Beneath all the wildness and rebellion that Ozzy's known for, there are moments of deep truth in his music. These are songs that actually saved him during his darkest times. They gave him a way to express feelings that he couldn't put into regular words. Throughout his career with Black Sabbath, Ozzy screamed and sang thousands of songs that touched millions of people who felt broken or misunderstood. But out of all those tracks, only 5 Black Sabbath songs have stayed truly close to his heart. These are the songs he considers his personal favorites from the band that essentially invented heavy metal music. They represent the journey of how a Birmingham factory worker became known as the Prince of Darkness. These 5 tracks still make him feel alive today. The 5th song on Ozzy's list is Paranoid, which proved that madness can have a very specific sound. The entire song lasts only 2.5 minutes, but in that short time, it captures something extraordinary. The story behind Paranoid is almost as interesting as the song itself. The band had finished recording their album, but realized they needed one more track to complete it. They only had 20 minutes of studio time remaining. There was no time for careful planning or elaborate arrangements. Tony Iommi started playing a guitar riff, and Ozzy began singing whatever words came into his head in that moment. What emerged from that spontaneous session changed the course of rock music history. The lyrics were pure stream of consciousness, without any careful editing or polish. Ozzy sang about feeling trapped in his own mind, about feeling crazy, about the sensation that the world was closing in around him. He wasn't trying to be poetic or clever with his words. He was simply being completely honest about what it felt like inside his own head. The panic, the confusion, the desperate need to escape from everything. The music perfectly matched the sense of madness in the lyrics. The tempo was fast and urgent, creating a feeling of relentlessness. Tony's guitar had a buzzing quality that sounded like angry bees. Geezer Butler's bass guitar thundered along like a racing heartbeat. Bill Ward's drums pounded with the intensity of someone running for their life. When all these elements came together, they created the sound of pure anxiety, transformed into art. The recording process was incredibly quick. They captured it in just 1 or 2 takes because there was no time to overthink anything or add polish. Ozzy later reflected that they were just 4 kids making noise, but sometimes that raw noise is exactly what the world needs to hear. The song became their biggest commercial hit. Radio stations played it constantly, and kids who felt like outsiders finally had an anthem they could call their own. People struggling with mental health issues heard someone who genuinely understood what they were going through. Ozzy had accidentally created the perfect soundtrack for feeling lost and alone in the world. When they performed Paranoid live, it created pure chaos in the best possible way. Audiences went absolutely wild from the very first note. Fans screamed along to every single word, using the song as a way to release their own frustrations and fears. Ozzy watched as thousands of people found their voice through his expression of madness. It became a moment where broken people were singing to other broken people, creating a community of shared experience. For Ozzy, this song represents what happens when you express yourself honestly without any shame. It shows how sometimes the quickest songs can cut the deepest into people's hearts. It demonstrates how admitting you're not okay can actually be the most powerful and brave thing a person can do. The fourth song is Sweet Leaf, which takes a very different approach. While many love songs are written about people, this one was about finding escape. The song has a unique origin story that begins with a cough. Ozzy had been smoking before they started recording, and when Tony began playing that heavy, slow guitar riff, Ozzy naturally coughed. Instead of editing it out, they decided to keep it in the final recording because it felt honest and real. The cough immediately shows listeners what the song is about before a single word is even sung. The guitar riff that Tony created was completely different from anything else Black Sabbath had recorded up to that point. It was slower and heavier, moving like thick molasses made of metal. It didn't rush to get anywhere or try to impress anyone with speed. Instead, it just existed there, thick and powerful, hanging in the air like smoke. Tony had discovered a new way to create heaviness without relying on fast tempos. Ozzy's lyrics function as a love letter to marijuana, but the song isn't simply glamorizing drug use. Instead, it's being honest about needing something to help cope with a harsh world. He sang about finding peace in a world that felt too difficult to face, about needing help to quiet all the noise inside his head. For a working-class kid from Birmingham, England, with limited options, this was the form of therapy he could actually afford. The song immediately became controversial. Parents groups complained loudly about it, and many radio stations refused to play it. But young people understood what Ozzy was really singing about. They recognized it wasn't just about drugs. It was about the universal need to escape, to find something that made the world more bearable. Whether that something was substances, music, or anything else that helped a person survive another difficult day.
The recording sessions for Sweet Leaf were unusually relaxed compared to their other work. The band took their time and let the song breathe naturally. They added layers slowly, carefully building a wall of sound that felt comfortable and safe rather than aggressive. Ozzy remembered that it was the first time they didn't sound angry in their music. Instead, they sounded human and vulnerable. When they performed Sweet Leaf live, it became an almost spiritual experience. Instead of moshing violently, audiences swayed gently to the music. People held up lighters, creating countless tiny stars in the darkness of the venue. Ozzy sang it like it was a prayer, slow and full of meaning. Everyone in the room felt understood and less alone. For Ozzy, this song represents the possibility of finding peace within chaos. It shows how sometimes the things that help you cope become worthy subjects for songs. It demonstrates how being honest about personal struggles can help other people feel less isolated in their own difficulties. The third song is Children of the Grave, which carries a powerful political message. The basic premise is that the future belongs to young people, but what happens if that future looks dark and threatening? This wasn't just another heavy song for the sake of being heavy. It was Ozzy's warning to the entire world, a message about what happens when society ignores the needs and voices of the next generation. When you leave young people nothing but war, hate, and broken promises, they eventually get angry. Ozzy became their voice. The song emerged from watching the world fall apart during the late 1960s and early 70s. The Vietnam War was raging overseas, protests were happening everywhere. Young people were dying for causes they didn't understand or believe in. Ozzy watched as kids his own age were being sent off to fight in wars that had been started by old men making political decisions. He saw an entire generation being sacrificed for the sake of politics and power. Someone needed to speak up for them, and Ozzy decided it would be him. Tony's guitar riff sounds like a battle cry. It's heavy, driving, and completely unstoppable. It marches forward with the determination of an army of forgotten people. Geesener's bass line crawls underneath everything like something dangerous rising up from underground. Bill's drums pound with the intensity of a revolutionary heartbeat. Together, all these elements create the sound of youth refusing to stay silent any longer. Ozzy's vocals work as both a warning and a prophecy. He sings about children rising up in rebellion, about innocent young people becoming dangerous when they're pushed too far by circumstances. His voice cracks with genuine emotion and raw anger. This wasn't just a performance or an act. This was testimony from someone who genuinely cared. He was speaking for everyone who felt abandoned and betrayed by the adult world that was supposed to protect them. The lyrics paint vivid pictures of apocalypse and destruction, but this wasn't fantasy or science fiction. It was fear made real through music. Ozzy could see clearly where society was heading if nothing changed. If powerful people kept ignoring the powerless, if old generations kept sacrificing young ones to cover up their own mistakes, then the grave referenced in the title wasn't just a metaphor. It was an actual destination that society was heading toward. Recording the song felt like documenting an important moment in history. The entire band understood they were capturing something significant, something that needed to be said regardless of commercial considerations. The energy in the studio felt electric and slightly dangerous. Everyone could sense they were creating more than just music. They were making a statement that would last long after they were all gone. Live performances of Children of the Grave became like political rallies. Audiences didn't just passively listen, they actively participated. They raised their fists in the air. They screamed along with passion. They felt their collective power as a generation coming together. Ozzy watched as young people found their voice through his words. The children weren't just listening to a song, they were rising up and claiming their future. For Ozzy, this song represents the importance of speaking truth to power, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might be. It shows how the heaviest music can carry the most important social and political messages. It demonstrates how sometimes young people have to save themselves because no one else will do it for them. The second song on Ozzy's list is Iron Man, which offers a different kind of heavy message. Heroes don't always wear capes or look the way we expect them to look. Sometimes they carry the unbearable weight of the world on their shoulders and get crushed by that burden. Many people assume Iron Man was inspired by comic books, but it actually came from something darker and more psychologically complex. Tony Iommi played that now legendary guitar riff, and Ozzy immediately heard a story in his head about a man who tried to save all of humanity but got horribly punished for his good intentions. A hero who became transformed into a monster simply because nobody understood him or listened to his warnings. The guitar riff itself represents pure musical genius. It's remarkably simple, but absolutely devastating in its impact. Just 4 notes that changed everything about how people thought about heavy music. Tony didn't need to show off his technical skills or play incredibly fast. He simply found the heaviest possible sound and let it crush everything in its path. When people think about what heavy music sounds like, this riff is what plays in their heads. It became the blueprint for musical power. Ozzy's lyrics tell a story about transformation gone completely wrong. A man somehow travels through time and sees the apocalyptic future of humanity. He comes back to the present to warn everyone about what's coming, but the act of time travel has transformed him into metal, making him unable to speak or communicate. Nobody listens to his desperate warnings because they can't understand him. In his frustration and isolation, he eventually becomes the very destroyer he originally traveled back in time to prevent. It's the ultimate tragedy wrapped inside the ultimate guitar riff, a man destroyed by his own heroic intentions. The lyrics are simple but incredibly powerful. Ozzy didn't use fancy vocabulary or complicated metaphors. He just told the story in a straightforward way, like a narrator calmly describing the end of the world. His voice carries the heavy weight of prophecy and the deep sadness of someone who knows exactly what's coming but is completely powerless to stop it. Every single word feels inevitable and unavoidable. Recording Iron Man felt like capturing actual thunder and putting it on tape. The entire band knew immediately that they had created something genuinely special. The guitar riff was so crushingly heavy that it seemed to bend reality around it. Ozzy's vocals floated over the top of this massive sound like a ghost narrator telling a story about the future. The contrast between the overwhelming heaviness of the music and the almost detached quality of the vocals created something truly unique that had never been heard before in rock music. For Ozzy, Iron Man represents the tragedy of misunderstood intentions and failed heroism, themes that would follow him throughout his entire career.